So hello, today I'm at the Church of St Mary the Virgin in Hawkwell in Essex. I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So Hawkwell is a village in Essex. It's surrounded by farmland and urban development, and it's the second largest village in Essex. Now it's 2.7 miles from Ashingdon and 1 mile from Hawkwell. The elevation here is 36 metres or 118 feet in old money. Today's population is around 12,000. So Hawkwell's history is long and varied, with Mesolithic tribes from 6000 BC living around the coastline here. Hawkwell sits on a peninsula with the Crouch estuaries to the north and the River Roach to the southeast. Now both of these estuaries enter the North Sea. Now a wooden paddle buried in the Crouch was carbon dated to around 900 BC, showing that the tribes were highly mobile during the late Bronze Age. Now the Romans had a settlement in nearby Rochford, and oysters and mussels were being harvested and exported. Now during the Saxon period, this corner of Essex comes alive with noble finds. In Paglesham, close by, a gold square brooch was discovered, and in Prittlewell a prince is buried along with his armour and weapons, dated to around the 7th century. Now Hawkwell's name is an unusual one. Its meaning is either a high well from the Saxons or a bend in the stream, but we can't be sure either way. Now we've moved to the next church, which is in Ashingdon, which is 1.7 miles nearer to the coastline. Now everything would change here in 1016, for Cnut the Great, the Danish Viking, would arrive only 4 miles away at Cnut. Now I'm going to zoom up to the church of Cnut. You could just make out this tower there. Now Cnut's mighty Viking army and 160 longships landed there on the 17th of October 1016. Cnut was the youngest son of Svein Forkbeard, and he had fought 4 battles over 12 months already in England. Now as Cnut's army camped that night at Cnut, the Saxon Edmund Ironside, King of the English, encamped with his army on the hill where I stand at Ashingdon. Now it's likely that Hawkwell's men were on this hill with King Edmund himself. Both armies lit up by their campfires on opposite hills. Now we're going to make our way down to where the battlefield took place. If you do come here, there are many walking routes. We shall make our way down to the bottom there. Now on the 18th, both armies met on the ground below, more or less where I stand now, and they would fight until sundown, and it was described as such. On that field Cnut destroyed a kingdom, there the whole flower of our country withered. Okay, almost there. It's a bit of a trek. Cnut would go on to become King of England, Denmark and Norway until his death in 1035. Now, so affected by the battle, Cnut would build a church here at Ashingdon, what we see today, and the foundations are most likely here. Now, under Edward the Confessor, Saxon rule would return. Now, Wulfmer was the Thane here, and Wulfmer was said to be the great Thane of King Edward. His castle stood in Bedfordshire, and he would die with sword or axe in hand at Hastings Field in 1066. Now, by 1086, Wulfmer's manor had become two Saxon manors. Now, Pirot of Wibboston and Udo the steward would act as lords here. Now, Pirot was from Normandy and would fight also at Hastings in 1066. Pirot held a manor in Bedfordshire, most likely confiscated from Wulfmer of Hawkwell. Now, did the two men fight each other that day on Hastings Fields? Now, Pierrot's manor consisted of 8 villagers, 5 smallholders and 2 slaves, and the land had 7 plough teams, pigs, sheep and 2 beehives, a sign of great wealth. And we're actually looking at the land itself. Now, Udo the Steward would take the second manor here, also acting as tenant-in-chief, making him the authority of Hawkwell. Now, Udo was a Norman aristocrat. His family supported William the Conqueror in France, and Udo's brothers in England would own Norwich and Nottingham castles. His third brother would actually be bishop. Now, Udo would be royal steward to William the Conqueror, William II and Henry I, and it was Udo who would build Colchester's castle and found its abbey in the reign of Henry I. Now, Udo was given the town of Colchester, which is England's oldest settlement. Now, by 1101, Udo was made Constable of the Tower of London, and later Udo would die in France, but was buried in his beloved Colchester in the abbey he built. Now, the parish of Hawkwell has in fact 2 wells, which were of great importance through the ages. And one of them was positioned right near the White Hart Inn, which is just over there. So this would have been the original village green. Now, the name of the White Hart Inn derives from the White Stag, the personal badge of Richard II in 1377. Now, going back further to the Celts of King Arthur's time, white stags were considered the messengers from the underworld. Now, today's pub is not so old. First registered in 1792 when James Benton was the landlord here. This pub would be the stop-off for the South into London stagecoaches. Now, today's pub is technically in the parish of Hockley, the boundaries forever moving. Now, the parish records of Hawkwell start from 1867, where the population was just 334. Today it's around 12,000. Now, I read in World War II Hawkwell was hit by many German bombs, leaving craters here. In September of 1940, Polish pilot Wacław Lapolski was shot down in a hurricane. He bailed out and landed right here in Hawkwell. He suffered from broken bones and burns, but he did survive. Now, Hawkwell would return to the 303 Polish Fighter Squadron of the RAF, taking part in the Battle of Britain and air combat over France and Belgium. In July of 1941, flying a Spitfire, his mission would be to lead and escort Blenheim bombers to Lille, near Belgium. Sadly, he was shot down and he would receive Poland's highest decoration. Just make out the Golden Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. just make out 1952. So now we've made our way to St Mary the Virgin's Church of Hawkwell. Now the date of St Mary's is unclear, but it's believed to be around the 14th century, but we can be sure there was a church here much earlier in time. Now the church is built from ragstone and flint rubble with limestone dressings. Now ragstone comes from Kent, so most likely would have come by boat up the River Crouch at Rochford. Well, this church is open Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, but please check online. So beginning with the South Porch, which was built in 1884. And if you look above the doorway where we've got the wooden arch, it says the House of Prayer. Now let us go inside this lovely old church. If we look at the south doorway, which is original, it's 14th century, and it's got the moulded jambs and two centred arch. Okay, so I'll take my cap off and we shall go through this 15th century door. Now looking closer at the door, notice the overlapping nail-studded outer door with battens and strap hinges. Now notice the crosses on the door strap. These were to ward off evil spirits. This is a herringbone pattern, but normally you get actual crosses on the strap hinge. Now if we work our way down, the handle is described as cinquefoiled handle plate. I just think this handle was turned for almost 600 years. And on the inside of the door, you can see the way it's constructed. Now if you look in the centre of the door, there's a brass plate. Now this is from 1857 and it's a memorial to Robert Sudbury, who left land and cottages to the poor in 1615. Now this was the year of the great snow, and snow fell from the 16th to the 22nd of January of that year, and it would lay on the ground for 8 weeks. Now also in this year the Archbishop of York kept his services in York and recorded 7 weeks of snow and frost, and it was described as never the like seen in England, with exceedingly great floods of water by the Forre. So we're now standing in the nave, which measures 30 feet by 17 feet and is 14th century. Now if I pan around, we'll look at the south doorway, the aspect of it. Now if you do visit, Hawkwell is a very busy place and the road outside has a small car park. You're most welcome. Okay, returning to the nave, we're going to look at the ceiling on the roof. Now this roof is 15th century and it's got moulded wall plates. In the middle, a truss supports a king post. Now the belfry is right above me, but we can just make out the king post there. So that's sort of 500 years old. Okay, as we enter the nave, on the south wall, this is a memorial from World War One, and it's to the 7 men who gave their lives for our freedom. Now, if we look to the left of the memorial, we have a window on the south wall, and it's a memorial window to Dale Knapping of 1878. Now we're facing the Chancel, and until recently this was actually one of the smallest, or if not the smallest church in Essex. Now the chancel itself measures 16 feet by 18 feet, it's 14th century, and the arch itself is 15th century two-centre arch. And you can see this is a very modern church now with its fitted carpet and comfortable chairs and central heating, that's a bonus as well. So if we look up to the top of the arch, on the right hand side there's a notch taken out, and this may well be for the original roof screen. Just make out the notch in the top in the centre. Okay, we're going to enter the chancel and let's have a look at a very interesting window, which is here. Now this window is 15th century, so it would match the date of the arch. It's thought to be a leper squint window, or a hagioscope, which in Greek meant holy to see. Now this would allow people with such diseases as leprosy, which would have been highly contagious, to be outside and to still view the sacred altar, hence why the window is set so low. Now if we look beneath the window, we have a prayer tree. And next to the tree we have a blessing bowl. Please place a pebble in the bowl of water and pray for a person you know to immerse them in God's love. And you've got the pebbles there. Now the glass that's fitted to the leper squint window remembers the local philanthropist Robert Sudbury, and it was paid for by the good Reverend James Montague, who we'll talk about later. Now if we move over to the left, we can see in the wall a piscina just beneath the window. Now in Latin, a piscina means fish pond. They were rare in England until the 13th century and were used to wash communion vessels. Now if you look, the drain is, which is in the centre there, will go into the wall. The holy water is designed to enter the fabric of the walls themselves and not the soil outside, as I understand it. So above the piscina, we'll go back to the window here. And this window is dated 1875. Now, when I looked up this year of 1875, the Times newspaper publishes the first daily weather map. And the Public Health Act establishes the code of practice for sanitation across England, in other words, toilets. And the Victorians gave us toilets. And that's another great thing this church has got, is toilets, actually. Fantastic. Okay, I've treated myself and I popped the lights on in the chancel. If you have a look, we've got some copies of paintings from the medieval period. Very ancient copies indeed. Well, I should say the actual copies are not ancient, but the originals would be. So if we have a look at each one briefly. So this is called the Trinity, and the original would have been 15th century. Feel free to pause it and read it yourself. This one is Christ Pantocrator, ruler of the universe, 16th century. You could just make out an angel on each corner. And again, feel free to pause it and read it. The original of this painting would be Christ in Glory, 1403. This is Mother and Child, 1131. So now we're standing back and looking at the east window. Now this is in memory of Reverend Charles Wallington and his wife Frances, and it was paid for by his boys, or their boys. Now in this pictorial it shows Jesus leading the remaining 11 disciples to Bethany, a village on the Mount of Olives. This is called Jesus Ascending into Heaven on the 40th day after his resurrection. Now Jesus instructs his disciples to remain in Jerusalem until the coming of the Holy Spirit. Now Bethany, I discovered, was where Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead, and also where Jesus would visit Lazarus before his crucifixion. And if we look at the base, we can just make out the village. Now the Arabs call Bethany al-Zahariah, which is the place of Lazarus. Today it's in Palestine in the West Bank. Excuse me if pronunciation's not correct. Now if we pan below, this panel remembers the fallen of World War I. For some reason, the original panel of glass is in the west window behind us. Okay, now we shall leave the chancel and walk through the nave, and we're going to look at the north aisle. So in 1995, a brand new north aisle was constructed. What a great job they've done. Now, if we look over to the arch in the left-hand corner, this was in fact the original arch was used from the old vestry. Now it's the door to the kitchen. Oh, no, I've got that wrong. Sorry, this door. Now we're going to look at these windows. Now we're looking at two windows. Now one of these is an original. Can you spot which one is the copy? So the craftsman have refitted the original window into the north aisle wall and have made a new one. A closer look. If we pan over to this side. Okay, if we go through this door here, we have the toilets. And if we go upstairs, we're now looking at the exposed chancel wall, which shows the ends of the timbers from the 15th century roof. 15th century, isn't that incredible? If we look from this angle, we can see the new arches, columns or bays. So it's given the church a lot more space, as you can see. And we can see this old doorway, some of the systems they'd used to keep the door secure, putting a huge timber across here. Now we're actually standing underneath the belfry, or shall I say a bell turret. This is 15th century and it's got 4 oak posts that support the square framing of the turret above, and the cross beams and braces hold it all firm. We're looking at the west window, which I've got no information on. It's quite a complex window, this one. Now, I did read that the good Reverend James Montague was also very handy in carpentry and actually made a pulpit, a prayer desk, which have been moved to make space, but I guess they're around somewhere. Okay, now we shall make our way outside. Okay, so the weather's up and down today, but we're looking at the bell tower, the belfry. Now, in 1757 there were 3 bells here. In 1788 one of the bells had been taken, and in 1849 there remained just one. And that bell is an 1806 Thomas Mere of London's Whitechapel foundry. Now Thomas was born in 1781, making him 25 when he cast the bell for this church. And I found out that Thomas married Matilda Hunt. And when he cast this bell in 1806, they were married. They would have 2 sons who would both go into casting bells. This poor old oak tree here's not had much luck. Well, it looks like it's been given a good haircut, and it looks like it's been struck by lightning also in the past. Now, I read in a pamphlet the oldest person to be buried here was Francis Wallington, of 100 years old, and Charles Wallington, 93. And they're just buried over there. Now I read that Charles was the reverend here, and I read they both had hearing problems, and I guess some would say this would be the secret to a happy marriage. I'm only joking. Now, I also read about a man called William Barton who is said to have committed murder, and he took his own life. The Reverend of the day refused to bury him on consecrated ground, and so William is buried in the hedge, which I believe is just beyond that tree. Now to the west side of the church, which is on the other side, and we'll have a look in a minute, is a 29-foot square burial plot. Beneath lays the poor souls who were struck down by the Black Death, the plague of 1665, which ran from London and all over Essex and other counties. I must say the weather forecasters are pretty accurate. They did say it would be overcast and sunny spells, mostly dry, so definitely getting better. Very mild, it's 12 degrees. So if we look at this plot here, which is quite unusual for a church, you can see there's no burials here at all. So Samuel Pepys, one of England's most famous authors, wrote in that period, 1665, "I having stayed in the city Little noise heard day or night but the tolling of bells. Now thankfully in 2023 we've got through the worst of the pandemic, our own pandemic of the times. So my heart goes out for all those that have suffered and lost people in that time. Now, as I said before, today St Mary the Virgin Church is kept open as much as possible due to its great volunteers. The church carries out coffee mornings and support groups for the bereaved, and they will serve hot soup and a roll. It's best to come into church, look at the notice boards or go online. So Hawkwell's St Mary the Virgin Church carries out baptisms, weddings and funerals. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.